Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for this webinar about value-added processing. We are going to wait another minute or so before we get started to give folks a second to get on the line. So thanks, hold on one moment. All right, good afternoon everybody. My name's Kaylee. Thanks a lot for joining us this afternoon. We're going to get started here. Hopefully everyone can hear this okay, and if you can't, I guess you can try and type into the chat box and address it to, you can pull down and just send it to the staff, send questions to staff, and we can try and troubleshoot you remotely. But you can also call in on that phone number that's listed on your email if the audio isn't working but the screen is working. But you probably don't know that unless we type that out, which we will in a second. Okay, so my name is Kaylee Fireisel. I'm the Food Safety Specialist for CAF, and I'm joined today by Dr. DiCaprio from UC Davis Extension, and I will let her introduce herself right now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Kaylee, for that introduction. So I'm really excited to be here today to share with you one of the resources that Kaylee and I have been working on over the last year, which is essentially a timeline to help those interested in either obtaining a processed food registration or a cannery license, go through that process with the state and ultimately make the product that you're desiring. So I work a lot with small processors, and I think both Kaylee and I identified this as a major need to help support the clientele that we work with. So hopefully we answer a lot of the questions you have today through this webinar, but feel free to reach out to either one of us at any time post if you have additional questions.
Great, thanks, Erin. So a brief orientation, you should have a GoToWebinar side panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And so if throughout the course of this you have any questions, feel free to type those into the question box there, and you can send it to all of us, or just send privately, just send only to Erin and myself. And we will monitor those as we go today. And if there are some that are just quick clarifying questions on what we're talking about, we will address those in the moment. And otherwise, we might hold some questions to certain times throughout the discussion today. So yeah, that's the main thing, that question box there. And also something to point out is in this handout section, there are PDFs of the two different resources we're going to mention today, the PFR, or the Processed Food Registration Permit, and also the Cannery License. They are in print form and in web form, because the web form has live hyperlinks. In the print form, those obviously aren't like blue and hyperlink, so those are better for printing. And I think that's all as far as orientation over on the right goes. And we will just get started here. So first, thank you to our funders, the Western Regional Center to Enhance Food Safety, funded Erin and I creating this resource and creating it over time, and then to the USDA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, Food Safety Outreach Program for funding this webinar today so we could share it with you all. Okay, so an introduction here. There's many small processors that are interested in becoming, or many small farmers that are interested in becoming small processors, and there's a lot of steps to go into creating and starting a business in this market. And so this is a great niche for processing of local foods, but there's a lot of financial and regulatory burdens, especially for very small businesses. So we're hoping that these resources will help farmers understand the multiple state and federal regulatory requirements for selling processed food products in California before you start diving into creating such a business, so you can optimize what your business intentions are and make strategic choices with creating new products and in a financially sound and food safety sound ways. So we have a couple questions for you all on the line today. Since we've mentioned about ourselves, I guess a little bit more about me is that I have an organic farming background and also do a lot of food safety technical assistance for farmers across the state. So that's kind of in a nutshell. But I have a question to send out to you. So there should be this question that pops up on your screen, and it's just a quick one. So let's see. So I'm going to launch it right now. And it says the poll is open, and you guys are answering. So we can't see it on our end, but that means it's working. All right, we're going to pause it here. We got most of the replies, so we're going to close it. So as far as audience today, the question was something about, are you currently making any value-added products? And a small percentage are yes, and 40% are no, and then 53% say they plan to. They're not currently, but they plan to, and that's why you're on this webinar. So good to hear that you're learning more about the steps you need to take. So we have 3 more quick questions for you guys, and this is kind of diving into, this is good that there's a large percentage of folks on this call that are not currently making products, but kind of planning to, so we can get a sense of your understanding of different regulatory levels for products. So this first question is, anyone currently or planning to produce a product under the California Cottage Food Law? Give a few more seconds. Okay, thanks everyone for your participation. So some people already do or are planning to, and the majority of folks, and then 23% know their product doesn't fit under the cottage food law, and then 15% are not quite sure what that is. And so we'll mention it briefly today, but there's other resources out there that dive deeper into that, including a previous webinar Erin and I did. So we have some links to that you can listen to for free. Okay, 2 more quick questions. So, is anyone currently or planning to produce a product under the California Processed Food Registration Permit? All right, we'll pause it, or we'll close it there. We've gotten a lot of responses. Perfect. There's a great interest by folks in learning what the PFR is, and that's perfect that you're on this webinar. We're going to really hopefully clear up some fuzziness about what it all is as we go through the next little bit. Okay, the last question here is, anyone currently or planning to produce a product under the California Cannery license? All right. Thanks again for your participation. We'll close that up, and that one was similar to our last one here. So this is great. I think we have an audience on the call today, or on the webinar, that we're addressing topics you're interested in learning more about. So let's move on. This is a little overview. So we had a different webinar on this flowchart resource that Erin and I created, and it is on this YouTube link, and there's PDFs of it as well on the UC Davis Food Safety website and CAF's website. So we have those listed in the resources pages at the end of this. And in the email follow-up you'll get after this webinar, there will be a PDF of the slides for today in it as well. So you can have those links there. But today we're going to focus mainly on this timeline number 1, the California Processed Food Registration Permit, and then we're going to talk a little bit about timeline number 2, the Cannery License Program. So an important note on value-added processing or products: there are many different types of value-added products that are made from raw agricultural products, and we just want to have a disclaimer right up front here that the resources that we are discussing are not exhaustive for every type of product that there is out there. And cheese making and meat curing are some areas where these resources don't apply to those products, and there might be some other ones out there, but we will give examples here of other products that these resources do apply to, like jams and jellies and acidified pickles and salsas and canned vegetables. So just to recognize that these are not a one-size-fits-all resource. All right, I think that means I'm turning it over to Erin.
Thanks, Kaylee. So now we're going to talk about food safety risks a bit and how those pertain to different categories of food. So I'm a food safety specialist and a food microbiologist by training. So this is right in my wheelhouse, and something that I find a lot of people entering the food business don't completely understand. So we're going to walk you through this and hopefully broaden the perspectives on what designates a low-risk food versus a high-risk food. So when you're starting your business, it's really important that you understand where the food product you're targeting falls on this food safety risk spectrum. So kind of from left to right, you can see we have very low risk foods and then higher risk foods. In general, our low risk foods are going to be foods that have a naturally high acid level or have a low pH. So essentially the pH is a measurement of the level of acidity of a food. The lower the pH, the more acid you have in the food product. Also, our low risk foods are going to be considered low water activity foods. And what that means essentially is that there's not a lot of available water in these types of products that would be supportive of the growth of microorganisms of public health concern. So if we can remove the water from our food product, we're taking that essential nutrient out of the realm of use for bacteria of concern. So our low risk foods are going to be things like honey, nut mixes, popcorn, fruit-based jams and jellies, and dried or dehydrated whole vegetables. In general, these are all foods that are going to be on the cottage food list, and we'll talk a little bit about the cottage food law in a minute. But again, I will refer you back to that previously recorded webinar if you want a little more details about the cottage food law. As we move up the food safety risk spectrum, in the medium range of risk are things like oils. So if you're interested in producing olive oil, this would be considered a medium risk type of food product. Things like canned tomatoes, canned fruits, traditionally fermented foods also fall in this medium risk category. And as well, some types of refrigerated foods are also considered medium risk because you're using that low temperature to control growth of any microorganisms that would cause humans to become ill if they consume that product. Over on the far right, are our high-risk foods. So these are foods that are naturally very low in acid, so things like canned vegetables, for example, or foods that are naturally low in acid to which we add some type of acid like vinegar or lemon juice to increase the acid level in those products. There's inherently some variability in that process, and so if that process of acidification isn't controlled very tightly, there can be a high risk associated with those types of products. So we call those acidified foods, and types of foods that fall into that acidified food category are things like canned salsa, hot sauces, and vinegar pickled vegetables. Again, I just want to reiterate, this isn't an exhaustive list. There are many other types of food that fall into each one of those spectrums, that we just wanted to give you a general idea of the types of food in each category. So, as you can imagine, as you kind of move up that risk spectrum, you also, because of the potential implications for human health, there are more regulations in those higher risk food categories versus our low risk food types. So the types of regulations that apply to our low risk foods would be the cottage food law. So this cottage food law has written in 33 types of foods that you're allowed to produce under that law. So you can't make just any type of food under the cottage food law. It's 33 low risk food types that the state of California decided was acceptable to produce in a cottage food operation. As we move up the spectrum in the medium food safety risk category, we have the processed food registration permit, which we're going to talk to you today about all the steps required in obtaining one of those processed food registrations, or PFRs, as you hear us refer to it. If you're producing organic, you would also want to obtain an organic processed food registration permit. So I'm sure as many of you are aware that are producing organic products, there's several other regulations and filings that you have to be compliant with in order for your product to be listed as organic. And for all processed foods that are being manufactured outside of a cottage food operation, FDA's labeling regulations also apply. So you need to make sure that you're familiar with those requirements and following those as well as you're producing your product. When we move over to the far right in our high-risk food category, where we're producing low-acid canned foods or acidified canned foods, so things again like canned vegetables or canned acidified pickles, a California Cannery license is required. And we'll briefly introduce the resource we developed, walking through the steps of obtaining a cannery license in California. The acidified food regulation will apply if you're producing one of the foods that falls under that category of acidified foods like vinegar, pickles, or hot sauce. If you're producing a low acid canned food like a canned vegetable, the low acid canned food regulation applies. And then depending on the size of your business, we have listed here the preventive controls rule for human food. That may apply to your business. If your annual sales reach a certain threshold and there are additional requirements from FDA to be compliant with that regulation. So as you can imagine, as you move up the food safety spectrum, when you move from few regulations to many regulations, the cost of running those types of businesses also increases. So a cottage food operation would be your lowest cost option for producing a processed or value-added food product. If you chose to go the cannery license route, that's going to be much more expensive than both the PFR and cottage food operation. Oops. So this is the example that we presented in our first webinar that, again, is linked to on CAF's website and the UC Food Safety website. And this is really a flow chart that goes over all applicable state and federal regulations for a value-added food processor. So this flow chart, we designed it so you could walk through it based on the type of product that you're producing and also the size of your business, where you're selling your product. So relevant regulations in this flowchart include the California Cottage Food Law. So you could use this flowchart to determine whether or not the product you're interested in producing would actually fall under the Cottage Food Law or not. We also go through the California Processed Food Registration and Cannery License Program, as well as relevant FDA regulations, so the federal regulations, both the Food Safety Modernization Act and those low acid canned food regulations and acidified food regulations. So I do encourage you to first utilize this resource to determine which regulation your business falls under. And then if you find out that you are required to have a processed food registration or cannery license, our other two timelines should be very helpful for you. So this flow chart, again, we go through some important federal and state regulations. So this should help you be able to navigate that process fairly easily. And so we're offering this webinar as kind of a follow-up because based on our first webinar, we found most people were either going to fall under a cottage food operation or be required to obtain a processed food registration. So this webinar is designed to aid those that found they needed the PFR when going through our first flow chart. So this is the front page of our new timeline that we've developed. So it provides an overview and a visual representation of the time required and all the different steps required for bringing one of these shelf-stable products or refrigerated products from an idea to market. So you can find this resource on CAF's website or the UC Food Safety website. And as Kaylee mentioned, we also have these resources linked to the webinar today. So I encourage you guys to seek these out and take a closer look after the webinar today. So who's required to get a processed food registration? In general, these are any businesses that manufacture, process, and or store food in California. And you're required to have this valid processed food registration before you engage in any of those activities. So I've run into a couple of individuals who are simply storing processed food products. They're not actually doing any processing on site. Those individuals are they're required to obtain one of these processed food registrations, even though they're not manufacturing that product on site, because they're holding food for human consumption. They're required to go through this process to make sure that food's being held under sanitary conditions and it's not going to become contaminated at any step. In general, foods that can be produced under a PFR are low and medium risk food products on that food safety spectrum. So if the food that you're interested in producing falls on the cottage food list, but you exceed that annual sales threshold for a cottage food operation, those types of products could be produced under a PFR. So we have here a list of some examples of foods that would require a PFR for manufacture, things like baked goods, snack food, noodles. I already mentioned oils, canned tomatoes, jams, jellies, traditionally fermented foods. So these are fermented foods to which you're just simply adding salt to a vegetable and allowing that to ferment naturally. You can't add any additional acid to those products, or else they would be considered acidified foods. But if you're making a traditionally fermented food, you can do that under processed food registration. And then refrigerated foods also fall on this list. So if you're interested in producing hot sauce, we've noted that here because we both encountered a lot of individuals that are interested in making hot sauces from their excess peppers that they grow. That is not on the California cottage food list. So that would require PFR if you're making, for example, a refrigerated hot sauce. If you're making what you hope will be a shelf-stable hot sauce, that would actually normally require a cannery license. You need to look at the exact recipe of the hot sauce to make the determination of where exactly it would fall, but that's in general where hot sauces would be. Yeah, I think we are now. I'm going to turn it over to Kaylee to let her walk you through the timeline.
I've got one question in the queue there, Erin, if you don't mind taking a look at it. Okay, thanks a lot, Erin, for laying the groundwork and the foundation there. And hopefully everybody, I believe the screen sharing snafu has been resolved, and thanks for folks typing in your question or letting us know that the screen sharing wasn't working early on, but luckily that was corrected pretty early, and the first few slides that I was talking about didn't have any tangible information on them that you didn't hear me say. So, and we'll send out the PDF with the slides tomorrow when that goes out. So that resolves kind of things that were happening in the question box. And now I'm going to take us through a little hypothetical example of a product that needs to get a processed food registration permit, or I'm going to just say from now on like PFR most of the time, so I'm slightly less tongue-tied. So here is, we don't expect you to be able to read or see very well. This is what the inside of the resource looks like. Normally it prints out on a tabloid piece of paper, so it's pretty big, two big pieces of paper full size next to each other. And we thought that providing a timeline visual for how the process of getting this permit would be useful for folks to see that you need to spend some time in advance of when you want to actually be actively making your product to get all of your ducks in a row. And it's hard to know exactly how many days it will take, but these are general day windows based off of our experience of reaching out to small processors or farmers that have gotten their PFR to make some products themselves and getting input from them on that. And speaking of farmers or small food processors, I should have mentioned in the beginning, but we have 2 folks that are going to share their stories of going through and successfully getting a PFR permit with their products later this webinar. And one is a product that's a mushroom jerky, and then another is a hot sauce that is a refrigerated hot sauce. So they only need to get the PFR permit because it's not a shelf-stable hot sauce. So we'll have a little bit of sharing from real-world examples a little bit later. Great, so to zoom in on this timeline and kind of walk through this timeline, this is what we're going to do for the next few slides. And we're going to use a hypothetical example of, say, we're going to make a kimchi brand, and we're going to use our leftover Napa cabbage and carrots and scallions and radishes and make a kimchi. And so this timeline has a few different coded items in it. In green, we have our regulatory steps. In purple, we have our business steps. And in orange, we have additional organic requirements if you're trying to have a organic product that is certified. And we are not claiming to have exhaustively put in information for the organic or the business steps because we are experts in food safety and not in those items or topic areas, but we wanted to put a little bit of some of the main things that we thought of for those for business steps and organic requirements, just to kind of help paint the whole picture. So initially, you're going to need to find a kitchen space because most folks aren't equipped with a kitchen with adequate equipment, and that's not a home kitchen, but a commercial kitchen of some kind. Usually, you're going to have to try and find a kitchen and rent space. So that's a first key step, because if you can't find that around you, then it's going to be pretty hard to make a product. But hopefully you find that, and then you realize that the product you want to make, in our case, the kimchi, which is naturally fermented, we need to get a PFR. And so we would send in the PFR application form, which is found on the California Department of Public Health's website. And we have hyperlinks to all of these at the end of this webinar. So you'd have to send in that application along with a fee, write a check to them for that permit. And then you also have to write a check for the food safety fee. Or if you're a business that is expecting to gross $20,000 or less annually, you can get an exemption from having to pay that. So you'll do those 2 regulatory steps and send in those forms or the exemption. And then you'll also want to, if you don't already have a food handler certificate at the manager level, highly recommend you do that and potentially attend other types of food safety training to get some more certified or approved formal training in this topic area. And then below the line there in orange, if you're looking to make this kimchi be organically certified, you would also need to send in an organic PFR form to the state along with the fee. And then you would also need to, depending upon how you're doing it, if you're already a farm, a certified organic farm, you already have what's called an organic system plan that you use every year during your annual inspection for your farm. And if you're going to add products to it, value-added products, it's likely that you need to update your organic system plan and possibly add a handler's certification to your organic certification. So I'm going to probably just stop there talking about this stuff because I'm not an expert in it, but I would recommend that you reach out to your certifying body, if that's CCOF, California Certified Organic Farmers, or Oregon Tilth, or Demeter, or whoever it is doing your organic certifying, and ask them in as far advance as possible what you need to do if you are intending to have the organic label on your product. If you're not intending to put the organic label on your product, then you don't need to do that. But that's just your call. Like maybe you just want to put your business name on there because people know your business and associate you with organic food, then maybe it's not worth the hassle to go through all of the formal processes to get the organic symbol on there. But maybe it is for you, so that depends. Okay, let's hop up to the top part of the timeline again and look at day 45. So we've sent in our kimchi PFR form, and we're waiting for the California Department of Public Health to contact us to schedule our PFR inspection for the kitchen. And if you don't hear them reach out to you by day 45, they say they take 4 to 6 weeks to process applications. And we encourage you, if you don't hear back by day 45, to reach out and call their main number and be a squeaky wheel and have them get back to you. So then by day 60, hopefully they will reach out and schedule your pre-production inspection of your facility. And so that's in the kitchen where you're going to be doing the processing. And so you want to make sure that you book out the kitchen to rent it out for your production needs and for when you are going to have your inspection. And so those are day 60, 65-ish. You also, around this time, want to start making a mock label, because during your inspection, your PFR inspection, not only do they look at the kitchen and the sanitariness of the kitchen, but they also will look at paperwork and your mock labels to make sure that you're including the appropriate details that you need to. Okay, so that was a lot. I think we don't have any questions clarifying that in there. That was a question from earlier. Okay, so to continue, excuse me. So on day 65, this is a slight overlap from this previous screen, but you'll want to make sure that you schedule kitchen rental times to make the product. And then hopefully by day 90, you will have your actual facility inspection, where an inspector from the Food and Drug branch at the California Department of Public Health will come out, and they will look at the facility, and they will, as I just said, check your labels, etc., and make sure that everything is squared away. And then under day 90, number 2, at that same time, if you're selling at a farmer's market or like a festival or something like that that requires a temporary food facility permit, you'd also want to file that permit with your county at that time, because it takes a little bit of time for that to get processed. So there is the chance that maybe at the first initial facility inspection you don't pass for whatever reason that might be. Maybe there was rodents present, or you didn't have any kind of food safety training yourself as a person, and so that would probably be cause for concern. There's not a clear black and white list of reasons why you would fail this inspection that you need to pass to get the permit, but in general they have to be pretty egregious things, like an unsanitary kitchen, not having the proper equipment there, etc. So if that happened, that doesn't mean that you can't ever use that kitchen. You would just need to make corrections and then schedule a re-inspection. So that's kind of what's happening below the line here, is that if you needed to get another inspection, that would take some time, obviously, to reschedule and make the corrections. And then hopefully by a couple weeks later, by day 110, you would have another in-person facility inspection to verify that you've done corrective actions and your kitchen and everything is all good to go. And then hopefully by day 120, you will receive your written approval to produce in the facility and have your PFR permit, and then also receive your written approval from the county to have your temporary food facility permit. And just to clarify, there's a little asterisk above this facility inspection under day 90, and that is because down on the screen that we can't see right now, there is something that says that you will be given like a verbal okay to produce your product during the day of your inspection when the inspector comes in person. If they are passing you, then they'll tell you that in person, and you can start producing your product even though you don't have the written PFR in person. If you choose to, you could do that. Doesn't mean you have to. You could wait till you have the written permit in place, but there is that kind of situation that exists. So then, yeah, that's kind of the basic walkthrough. You need to have your kitchen and your process inspected in person before you can go about making the product. And once they inspect and give you the okay, then you are allowed to make your product and sell it. So that is a walkthrough of the PFR permit. Was there a question?
There were a couple other questions that came in. I don't know if we want to go through them or you set.
Yeah. Because we were going to transition to Wyatt explaining his PFR process, but for some reason, this is the smallest little window right now for where we can see your questions. So this question here, if you rent a commercial kitchen that many other processed food producers are also using, will CDPH still want to do an inspection, or will they have already inspected it? So the short answer is that the inspection is not just to inspect the kitchen, the walls and the floor and the sinks and things, but it also is about your specific product or products that you're making and the processes that you're using to make those products. And it's attached to the business. So like all these different business entities are renting out space in the kitchen. So it's associated with the person. So yeah, each of those individual each of those individual businesses renting out space there would want to do it, is the short answer to your question. Erin, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
No, I think you hit that right on the head.
Okay, and let's see. There's another question. Does the $20,000 fee exemption apply to total farm income for the food safety fee? That's getting back to the initial forms that you send in at the beginning. I believe that applies to the product, but Erin, do you know?
I'm not sure. I think it's for the product as well, but
Yes, not sure about that one. Good question. We will flag it and can try and get an answer in that email that goes out tomorrow with the other recording and stuff. Another question. For the farmers market, does the PFR permit, the cannery license, and cottage food licenses need to be posted at the booth? So when you get to sell like the kimchi at the farmers market, we would have to get that temporary food facility permit. And essentially by getting that temporary food facility permit, it nests having the PFR permit like inside of the temporary food facility permit. So, excuse me. Excuse me. So essentially the county is making sure you are getting those other state level permits that are required, cannery, PFR, cottage food, by having that work that way, that they don't let you get the TFF permit without having the appropriate state level permits. So do you have more to add, Erin? Or?
no, I think in general, if one of these permits is required for production of that food product, you're gonna, essentially need to have that to be able to sell at the farmers markets. The long and short of it, yeah. Just how that gets packaged might be variable.
Yeah, I can't say that I know of off the top of my head that farmers market managers like require folks to post their PFR permit at their farmers market booth. I haven't actually ever seen that in reality, but the market managers would have the TFF permit on hand. They couldn't get that unless you had your PFR. So hopefully that helps you in that question. For now, for the sake of time, let's transition to Wyatt, who has been waiting here for, let me change so he is with Jewels of the Forest, which creates this delicious mushroom jerky that I've tried. It's amazing. They have these big dehydrator walk-in stacked dehydrators here, and we have a few more questions that we'll hopefully circle back to, but for a few minutes, let's switch to Wyatt and have him tell his story about going through the process of getting a PFR permit. And hopefully you're unmuted now, Wyatt. Hopefully we can hear you. Can you go ahead and talk?
Yeah, aloha. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Hello?
We can't hear you,
Can you hear
Wyatt,
me now?
but
How's that?
I can see that your audio's playing. Oh, I think he's... Okay, they can hear Wyatt. Okay.
How about now? Can you guys hear me now? Hello, can you guys hear me now? Hello. Hello. Hello, can you guys hear me now? Hello. I'm calling in from my phone, wondering if this is helping at all. I don't know. I'm losing all audio here.
No.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, Wyatt, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, they can hear you.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're having a little technical issues, but they can hear you now. So go ahead and explain how your first process of getting the PFR worked as far as applying for it.
Yeah, no problem. Great. So, yes, my name is Wyatt Bryson, and my brother, he's the chef, and he's the one who did a lot of the process. We worked on it together. But let me tell you a little bit about our story. So we originally rented out a commercial kitchen in Sebastopol, California, and we actually found them online. And they're a really great place to start. They've helped a couple businesses start there and grow and move out as the business grew. Their name is Sova Gardens, and they're on 116 out there. And I know they're always looking for new companies to come on in, so I could always make a reference with that. One of the first things, looking at your timeline here, I think this is a great resource, and I wish I had something like this when we were doing it, because I kind of had to figure it out all on our own. A few things that I would add to this on the business side. I think before you can even file for your PFR, you're going to need a tax ID business, a tax ID number for your business to put on your PFR. So that would be either through the IRS if you're incorporating as a LLC or a corporation, or even as a partnership. So I would definitely start with that, so you have all the number, specific numbers they're going to need to file that paperwork. The timeline looks really great. Sometimes they can be very busy especially with the inspectors. And so, I call basically every other week or every week to be on them. And yes, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So sometimes you just need to stay on them and keep calling them, and that can really help out. So another big thing is your labeling, and I wanted to refer people to a labeling download that I got off of the California Department of Public Health Food and Drug Branch, and it's close up on food labeling, information for California food processors. And this is something really important because when you do get your inspection, you want to make sure that your labeling, that's one of the most important things they're going to be looking at, because most likely than not, the kitchen that you choose has already had inspections, and so the inspectors are going to be fairly familiar with the location, and they will do their inspection, but they're going to look a lot at your labeling. And so knowing what you can and cannot say on your label, how to make your nutritional label, those are going to be all things you want to really have worked out before you go to your inspection. One thing for the nutritional label, a great resource is a website called Recipal. And they basically, you put in your ingredients, you put in the amounts, and it kicks out a nutrition label for you. So that's very helpful. And it takes a little while to kind of to navigate it and to learn how to understand it. But the website will actually allow you to do 2 free recipes. So if you're only starting out with 1 or 2 products, it's free. So pay close. Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious if you could share, besides like label mock-ups and the label kind of paperwork stuff, what other type of paperwork did you get ready for your PFR inspection?
So for PFR, besides the labeling, obviously like our business stuff, our seller's permit, you know, food handling license, all the things you have on here, food handler certificate. And that's a class that you could take. It's like $15. You can do it online. It's not that hard. Let's see. Other kind of pre-paperwork stuff. I mentioned, you know, having the right business stuff set up so you can apply for the PFR. You know, doing a little due diligence on the kitchen that you are going to be using. Making sure that it is clean, you're inspecting it, you know, that really helps so you don't, you know, get denied on your first inspection and then have to wait, you know, a number of days or weeks to go back and do that again. Also, if you're adding anything like vegan on there, to have the certified vegan sticker, that's a really low cost one to get. I think it's around $250. So you need to have all of those certain things in place if you're going to make those claims on your product. So that kind of paperwork, like you said, the organic certification, if you're doing any other certifications, GMO free, you know, kosher, you know, there's a bunch of other ones that you can try to get, but having those kind of lined up as well.
That's great. Thanks. We had a question come in. Can you repeat the name of the recipe website you used?
What's the name of it?
Yeah.
It's Recipal, RECIPAL.com.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a great one to do. Let's see, some other things you have on here on the timeline. Let's see, I think all of it, I think the time line itself with the days is very accurate. You know, it depends also like how much volume and what these different you know, organizations are going through and their workload and stuff. It can change a little bit, but so you know, continuing with our story, after we outgrew Sova Gardens, that kitchen, we had a choice whether to try to find another kitchen. Because at that one, we were renting it out on we had a certain time lot per day. We ended up actually deciding on making our own production facility and our own commercial kitchen. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, which I'm not even going to start with. But then we had to go through the whole PFR process again. And it's so much easier once you have gone through it before and you know what you're doing. And we literally got it done, you know, in like 2 to 3 months. So yeah, about 90 days. because we had everything all set up and we knew what we were doing and we knew how long it would take. So in our new facility, we've just gotten our green card and everything's passed, everything's all good. A few other things with the PFR itself, testing of your product, right? They're going to require, depending on what kind of product you have, for us, we have a snack food and moisture content was a big thing. So we had to have some testing done. There's many food testing labs all around the area, San Francisco, that you can go to. So you might want to think about that and look at the regulations and testing that might be involved with your specific product. You might not even have any. So it kind of depends on your product. That might be one thing to have in consideration. And what happens when you come and get your inspection with your PFR? They're really great, and they're going to tell you kind of the things that they want you to change or that you don't necessarily have there, and then they give you the time to be able to make those corrections. And from that, you could pretty much work with them online. Like we had to change a few things on our packaging, and then we just took pictures of it and sent it in, and they cleared us. A nice thing and something to think about is when you get your inspection, ask the inspector if it's okay for you to start being able to sell and produce, and if they could provide that number so you have that on file before they actually issue your physical piece of paper, because that can take a week or two, and if you want to start selling right away, they will allow you to do that. So that's good. On one of the questions you had earlier about the farmers markets and stuff, one thing it's really good to do is I've got binders of all of that paperwork, and I have one for when we go do farmers markets. I have our binder here at the store where we can show what needs to be shown here. And so just being a little bit organized will save you problems if they do have inspections at farmers markets and stuff like that. And you'll just be prepared to say, well, oh, here's this paperwork that you needed, and boom, they sign you off and it's all good.
Great,
so
thanks.
That's kind of, yeah, little tips.
Sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to ask you another question, which is, when you sent in your initial PFR paperwork and the fee, a few $100 fee that it is, did you have to pay anything else for your inspection or anything later on, or was that the only payment you did for the permit?
So you do pay the initial fee for the processing of the permit, and then you do have to pay for the inspection. So that's a separate fee, yeah. And then usually, like, if they don't have to physically come out and inspect, then they don't charge you again. So like in the instance where we had to change some stuff in our packaging, we changed it and then just sent them a picture, and then they were okay, great, and approved us,
Right. Okay, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I don't know, any other kind of questions you guys have, or we're a great resource here. I love sharing information. I love working with you guys, with CAF, with just all the organizations around here. There's a lot of amazing farmers guilds and FIG, food industry groups around here, and it's great to try to learn as much as you can from everybody. And usually the people at the PFR office are really helpful, and they're there to answer any questions you have. So don't feel afraid to ask them. I love asking questions because then it saves me from spinning my wheels or making mistakes. So, I would definitely recommend asking as many people as you can and finding out as much information as you can. And then, there's many checklists that they give you so you can know, like, okay, I've got that done. Now I'm going to work on this. I could get this done. And so, yeah, there's so many resources. And now, like, this stuff that you guys are putting out, this is a really big help to people. And I wish that I had known about it when I was going through this in the beginning.
Well, thanks a lot, Wyatt, for sharing your story and the useful, practical experience and comments you have for the group. But just in the instance of time, I see we're getting really close to 4. So I think, and we don't have any other questions that have come in specifically for you, Wyatt, but I'm sure everyone has learned a lot from you sharing. And I imagine if they Googled like Jewels of the Forest and got on your website, your email address and things are there, right? If they wanted to reach out to you and for any follow-up, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. You could go to shroomjerky.com and feel free to ask me anything. And I just want to throw this out there that because we do own our own commercial kitchen now, we are actually starting to rent it out. And we're about to take on a new company that's developing elixirs. And so if anyone else out there is looking for a commercial kitchen, they're having a hard time, please send us an email or give us a call.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for that and for your story. And we're going to try and see if we can successfully make this technology switch back to us talking on the other device, not on the phone right now. But I'm going to mute you again, Wyatt, and we will kind of round out the webinar here. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
All right. Oh. Okay, I think, okay, great. We're not getting a lot of feedback. So I know we're right at 4 and we are going to run a couple minutes over. So just to respect everyone's time here, totally okay. If you want to hop off here, we're going to send out the full recording of this if you want to listen to the last few minutes at your own leisure. I feel like we have a couple minute recording here from another grower that made the hot sauce, and I think that it's worth our time while we're here to just play this quick because I think folks might be interested in it. And so we're just going to play this recording and then maybe take 1 or 2 questions if there are any that come up and round out the webinar for today. So hopefully technology will work again, but here we go. So this is, thank you, this is with Red Shed Farm with Stephanie here on the screen, and there are 2 types of hot sauce that they made last year. And the green and the red one there, normally they have the labels on them, but that was just a photo op, so they didn't have the labels on them to really show the color of the sauce. So here is Stephanie explaining a little bit of their process of successfully obtaining a PFR permit.
My name is Stephanie Stevens. I own Red Shed Farm, and we specialize in growing peppers for hot sauces. When I first started looking into bottling hot sauce, I already knew that it was considered too high risk a product to qualify as a cottage food, so I reached out to my county environmental health department to figure out what county or state permits I would need to sell packaged products. That's when I learned that I would need to acquire a processed food registration permit. At the time, the whole thing seemed very daunting. I submitted my application in mid-May, and my on-site inspection took place in September, which is slightly longer than the timeline suggests, but that was partly because I had to wait for my commercial kitchen to become available in order to schedule an inspection. To give you an idea of how long each step took, I waited 1 month to check on the status of my application with the Department of Public Health. She replied promptly and let me know that it could take 4 to 6 weeks for the application to be processed, which I already knew, so I waited another month and emailed her again. At that point, she gave me the district supervisor's contact information and I reached out to him that same day. Shortly after, I was contacted by my inspector to set up an on-site visit. I'm not sure how long it would have taken if I hadn't been politely persistent. You really have to be your own advocate and keep the ball rolling. I was very nervous for the in-person inspection, so I spent a lot of time working on my food safety plan to make sure I had every detail covered. We also spent a full day cleaning and reorganizing our rented kitchen so that it conformed to the standard requirements in my food manager certification class. When the inspector arrived, she checked the temperature of the refrigerator, reviewed my labels, and asked the manager of the kitchen to provide well tests and details about the pest control provider. Then she asked me to walk her through my production process, which was very hypothetical since we weren't technically supposed to be producing anything yet. She didn't end up reviewing my written food safety plan while she was there, which was a little disappointing because I spent so much time agonizing over it. However, knowing the information inside of it really helped me stay calm and collected. From my experience, I think that the most important thing you can do is demonstrate that you know what you're talking about. Speak confidently, sound like you're an expert, because you are. Nobody knows your product better than you do. I highly recommend taking your food safety classes before this inspection so you're able to know your temperature safety zones, critical control points, best practices, so you're able to speak confidently. I've spoken to other people who've been through this process, and we agree. When you hesitate or act doubtful, it opens you up to a higher degree of scrutiny and interrogation. Because you may know what you're talking about, but if you appear like you don't, they're going to ask questions. My last suggestion would be that you really take your time and find a commercial kitchen that is well suited to your needs. Because if you begin making your product and then realize a couple weeks in that you want to change kitchens, you'll have to go through the entire process again, including paying the fees. All in all, the process really isn't as complicated as it may seem, but it does take a lot of effort and a lot of patience. If you know your products and your practices, there's really no reason you can't ace this inspection.
All right, so that was from Stephanie from Red Shed Farm, and she couldn't be with us today because of a scheduling conflict, but she kindly recorded that for us and to share a little bit of her story, and I think that's helpful to learn about. And just to really emphasize, since this hot sauce was bottled, but it was kept refrigerated and sold to stay refrigerated, that it wasn't shelf stable, so it didn't need a cannery license. So that's why she only got the PFR permit for her product. I just want to really emphasize that. So we don't have any outstanding questions on that, so I'll just continue. And Erin's going to say a few words about this cannery license.
I'll try and keep it short since I know we're over time already. But we'll just briefly touch on the California cannery license. Again, these are required for low acid foods that have a naturally high pH. So in general, that would be most of our canned vegetables. It also applies to acidified foods. So these are foods where you have a vegetable base to which you add vinegar or lemon juice to cause the pH of those vegetables to decrease and increase the acidity level. Those are called acidified foods. So those would be things like dilly beans, salsas, and hot sauces that are shelf stable. So we have here a list of foods that require a cannery license in California. So our low acid canned foods, vegetables, most soups and stocks are going to be considered low acid canned foods as well. And then our acidified canned foods are things like tomato sauces with added vegetables. So if you're adding onions or garlic to your tomato sauce, that would be considered an acidified food because you're adding those vegetables that don't have a lot of acid to that acid tomato. So the tomato sauce is actually what's bringing down the pH of those other ingredients. So those are considered acidified foods. Salsas, hot sauces are two that are really popular to make that do require a cannery license. Pickled eggs with vinegar are considered acidified foods. We had a question about fermented eggs earlier. So I'm going to have to do a little digging on that question. Regulation of eggs is a little complicated. FDA regulates some egg products while USDA regulates others. Fermented eggs might fall under USDA jurisdiction rather than FDA, but I'll have to do a little bit more digging and get back to you on that, Karen. And as previously mentioned, this again is not an exhaustive list of all the foods that wouldn't be produced under a cannery license. And I'll just mention that the ingredients and the amounts of each of those ingredients are really, really important in determining whether or not you have a food that requires a cannery license or a PFR. So it's really important to have those details hashed out before you start putting in these applications with the state. So this is an overview of the resource. That's the timeline for the cannery license. So just in comparison to the PFR timeline, you can see it's a little bit longer in the length of time it takes, and there are many more steps and filings along the way. So in addition to several filings with the state, you're also required to take a very specific training course for producing these types of foods, the Better Process Control School or the Acidified Foods Manufacturing School. We offer both of those courses through UC Davis. We actually have our Acidified Foods course coming up September 18th. So if you're interested in producing a hot sauce or an acidified food, I do encourage you to check out our website and look into taking that course. We have someone from the California Department of Public Health Food and Drug Branch that actually evaluates all of these products and issues these permits, come out and help teach that course. They walk you through all the filings that you need to do with the state to produce an acidified food product. So I'm not going to spend any more time on this. I do encourage you to take a look if you're interested in producing one of those products that is going to require a cannery license. Do we have another question more on the egg?
Yeah, no more questions to address as the group. So.
Okay. So I just want to point you guys to some other resources that are out there. So the California Department of Food and Ag Small Farm Food Safety Guidelines has a lot of useful resources for growers interested in producing value-added products. The UC Davis food safety web pages, we have a lot of resources. There's lists of testing labs, for example, if that's something that you come up against and you need to do. We have some lists of co-packers and commercial kitchens there. But as Wyatt mentioned, kind of working with peer groups, I think is really a great way to figure out what the best path is for you for producing your product. And then, of course, CAF, hosting this great webinar today, has a lot of resources available for growers and those interested in producing value-added products. It was mentioned, I think as well by Wyatt, that the California Department of Public Health Food and Drug Branch does have a lot of useful documents on their webpage. So we've linked here to their specific resources for cottage food operations, the processed food registration, and the cannery license. So again, I encourage you to seek out those resources that are pertinent to your business. And I think with that, we've gone through the meat of the webinar. Do we have any outstanding questions in the queue? All right, well, thank you all for attending today. I hope you were able to glean some useful information from the webinar. And please, if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Kaylee. Our contact information is here. We're happy to answer any more specific questions that you have.
Great. Thanks a lot to everyone. Thanks to Wyatt and for Stephanie for sharing their stories. Those are great. And happy processing, everyone. Stay safe and enjoy.